Yo people, welcome to my guide on the best and most efficient ways to level up crafting in Final Fantasy XIV. Before we continue, just want to say I hope you're all well and I hope you had a great start to the new year. If you're a complete beginner into crafting, don't worry, I will try my best to explain the basic fundamentals of crafting before we continue. In this guide, I will be covering the most efficient and cost-effective ways to level up crafting all the ways from 1 to 90, as well as pointing out how you can alter these methods to power level should you have the guild to spend on it. So, why craft? Well, there are multiple different crafting classes, all which have their own unique recipes, and all of which are relevant in the end game. For example, a culinarian has access to all foods, including raid buff foods, which are highly sought after by endgame raiders, and crafting or gathering buff foods, which are essential to hit the stats required to successfully craft or gather specific items. Or maybe you want to be a blacksmith, which primarily focuses on creating primary and secondary tools or weapons, including the sweet shiny crafted raid boss weapons, and the tools used for other crafting and gathering classes. Otherwise, if you're into housing, you can become a carpenter and open up access to all kinds of crafted housing items. In light of the previous reasons mentioned, these all tie into the next big reason, which is gil making. If you want to make that sweet gil, then look no further. Crafting is definitely where it's at. I won't be teaching you how to make gil in this guide, however, I will be making a how to make gil guide at some point, so subscribe to stay tuned. Overall, crafting is huge content by itself, and for many people, this is the main content they play in the game. You will also have the ability to be fully self-sufficient if you care about that, providing you also gather all the mats yourself. So we've gone over some of the main reasons to craft. Now, how do you begin? You can start your crafting journey by picking up the blue quest at your preferred crafting guild. All crafting guilds are split across the 3 starting cities. For example, for cooking or culinarian, you need to head over to Limsa and then the Aft Castle, and then head over and complete the intro quest given by the guild receptionist. Once completed, you will be given a primary tool which you can now equip to unlock your cooking class. Now, let me give you some essential tips before starting your journey on becoming a demigod billionaire omnicrafter. You will want to make use of XP buffs to make your journey a lot quicker. There are 3 ways in which you can increase your XP rates gained through crafting to my knowledge at this moment in time. Number 1, stock up on your XP scrolls. These are called company issue engineering manuals. You can buy these from your grand company by spending your seals. Best way to get seals would be to complete your daily deliveries and also to hand in any unwanted gear via expert deliveries. So as a side note, make sure to greed on every item that drops whilst doing your daily roulettes. These scrolls give 150% boost of XP up to a certain amount of XP gained, or 18 hours, whichever comes first. There are 2 types of these scrolls that you can get from your GC. Level 1, which gives you 150% XP buff up to 250k points. And level 2, which gives you 150% XP buff up to 500k points. Keep note, however, the effect is halved for these after level 40 for the level 1 manual and after level 50 for the level 2 manual. At level 60 you can move on to another engineering manual, but for this guide we won't need it. Alongside the manuals, you always want to be making use of food buffs for the extra 3% XP. It's not much, but again it's better than nothing. You will need just under 11 mil XP in total to get to level 90. So the extra 3% you get along the way will help a little. In the early leveling stages, you can typically just use cheap foods such as boiled eggs. These can be purchased from a vendor in any of the starting city market areas. Later down the line, you can then start using food which gives CP and control to also give you a boost to your crafting stats. The third XP boost we can get is from FC buffs. The buff called Helping Hand 2 gives a daily 10% crafting boost. This stacks with the food buff and also the manuals. Another useful buff would be the Meat and Mead buff, which extends your food buff duration by 10 minutes, essentially meaning more uptime and less food used. So if you're in a crafting FC, or you have your own FC, or if you are in an FC where you can suggest which buffs to use, make sure to make good use of this. Before you begin leveling, you will also want to unlock Ishgard Restoration. This will save you from having to pause your leveling process to unlock it later, since we will be coming here at level 20. Ishgard Restoration can be unlocked by completing a quest called Towards the Firmament, which can be picked up at the recruitment notice board in the Foundation. Once the quest is complete, you will want to speak to Orgbert in the Firmament, and you will now be able to travel to the Firmament from the main Ishgard Aetheryte. So now let's move on to the leveling process. From level 1 to 21, the quickest way would be to just use quick synthesis to craft base material items. The way in which you unlock quick synthesis is by successfully crafting an item manually at least once. In the example shown, we can make 1 maple lumber from 3 maple logs. Maple lumber is a material, so each maple lumber crafted will only use 1 slot. If you made maple clogs on the other hand, each maple clog will take up 1 inventory slot each. Eventually, we will then have to clear our inventory, meaning that we are wasting some time. So for efficiency's sake, I would stick with the lumber and spam craft as many as you can until your leveling starts to slow down. At this point, you can then just make a few of the items with the materials that you have, and then once you reach level 10, you should unlock a new base recipe, which you can then spam. You can craft up to a max of 99 using quick synthesis, so this is a perfect opportunity to do anything else you needed to in the meantime. You want to buy the maple logs from the merchant at the guilds. Just a side note, whenever buying materials to use for crafting, make sure you check the tooltip in case you see a shop selling price. If there is one, it means you can purchase it from a vendor somewhere. I've seen too many people that miss out on this and end up spending more for the items on the MB. Key tip, don't get hustled. Also, just in case you're wondering, gear will not be important at level 1. This is because everything that we are quick synthesizing will be low effort and low cost, so crafts that fail should not have an impact. So feel free to flex your glam during this stage. So now that we have reached level 21 on our crafts, we will now be on our way to use the Ishgard restoration. Before we head there, we will need to get some gear. So in the starting 3 cities, you can actually purchase vendor crafted gear up to level 30. A full set of the lowest level gear, including accessories and tools, should cost you around 10k. Make sure to also purchase your tools and your accessories. Some items you will have to wait till level 24 to use, for example the legs, since this is the lowest level purchasable item for that slot. Just as a side note, you can purchase gear from 30 to 60 in Ishgard, then from 61 to 70 in Kugane, 71 to 80 in Crystarium, and you can also purchase 81 to 90 gear in the new Endwalker city. We can also get Grand Company gear at level 50 if you have a high enough rank, which will be the most cost effective to use. So if we head over to the Firmament and then speak to Potkin located at the counter to the right of you when you first get in, you will see a pop-up menu showing items that can be handed in. The collectability column shows the minimum collectible level that the item will need for you to be able to hand it in. You can also see how many scripts you will get for handing any of the items in, and these can be spent at the vendor for a bunch of items, emotes or special dies. These can either be used by yourself or you can sell it on the MB for profit. So if you open up your crafting log and then go to the special recipe tab and then open Ishgard Restoration 4, you should see a level 20 craftable item. All Ishgard Restoration recipes will require at least one of the approved grade 4 items. Now, these items are either obtainable from the diadem through gathering or purchasable on the market board. At this moment in time, the cost of these are so cheap that it would literally be a waste of time to gather. For example, on my server right now, the hemps are 6 skill each on the MB. For the straw, if we use the tip that I mentioned earlier, we can see that there is a shop selling price. Whenever I see items that have a shop selling price, I always just do a quick Google search to see where they can be purchased from. If we, however, checked another crafter's level 20 Ishgard recipe, for example Culinarian, we can see the maple syrup has no shop selling price. If we right click the item and hit search by crafting methods, we are taken to a recipe menu of how we can actually make these. Similarly, if you hit search by gathering method instead, you will be shown a map indication of where these can be gathered from if you have a high enough gathering level. So now that you have all the mats needed and the gear, you are ready to progress. Unfortunately, we won't be able to use quick synthesis anymore, so this is when we will begin to start using macros. They sound a lot scarier than they are, so just in case you haven't actually used one before, let me quickly go over just a quick step-by-step on how to actually make one. I will be posting a link with all macros I use in the description. So you can open your macros by going to System and then User Macros. If you've never used macros before, this will be completely empty for you. You will want to pick an empty slot and then on the right hand side, pick a name for the macro. In this case, we'll be calling this level 20 Ishgard. Underneath is where you will input your actual macro. In this case, I will copy and paste the macro I will be providing to you guys. So now you can select an icon and then drag it onto your hotbar. And now the macro is ready to be used. So if we go back to the crafting log and we now hit synthesis on the Sky Builder's rope recipe, and then we hit the macro button on our hotbar, the macro will now do the job for you. Remember, in order to hand these items in, we do need a minimum collectability rating of 50. To give yourself a basic understanding on how crafting skills work, it will be good to look at the macros and then look at your skill list to see what they are actually doing and why the craft is working. The most important things to look at for now are the durability and the collectability of the item. The main skills for crafters reside around touch and synthesis. Touch increases quality, in this case collectability, and synthesis increases the progress bar. Both actions will use up durability points, and if this reaches 0, then your craft will essentially fail. However, these macros are designed to use a set of skills to prevent this from happening. With all the gear you have equipped and the macros being used, you should be able to hit 50 collectability on the craft. You will want to craft around 10 items or so and then hand them in. You should gain a bunch of levels, which means now that your stats are higher, the next time you actually use the macro, your collectability rating for the craft should also be higher. The higher the collectability of the item that you hand in, the more bonus XP scripts you will get back if you hit the next tier of collectability rating. You will want to do this up until level 35 to 40, where you will then have two options. You can either continue using the gear you have now along with the level 20 macro that you're using and farm this up to level 50, or to speed up the process, you can purchase the highest level gear that you can at the moment from a vendor and move on to the level 30 macro, which I will post in a link in the description. If the 30 macro isn't working for your gear, just use some very cheap CP material to meld into your gear along with some stone soup. This should give you more than enough. So now that you've reached level 50, I just want to say a big congratulations for making it this far. It's now time for some gear upgrades. Again, at this point you have a few options. The most cost-effective way to gear at this level would be from your Grand Company, which I mentioned earlier. However, you will need to have a high enough Grand Company rank in order to unlock this. Note that if you do decide to pick this option, you still will need to craft or purchase your accessories. If you're not able to actually make the accessories yourself, then it would be best to gather or purchase the required materials for the accessories and ask for a crafter friend to help you. As a crafter myself, I can confidently say that I'm sure most of us will be friendly and willing to help. Just don't spam or be annoying. If you're unable to obtain a level 50 gear from your Grand Company or find a crafter to help you, then the next option would be to just get the purchasable gear that you can from the vendor in Ishgard or on the market board. The gear should be pretty cheap, and again, a few CP material meld should give you enough CP to continue. Make sure to also purchase a primary tool and a secondary tool. At this level, I would move on to the level 40 Ishgard recipe. I will post a level 40 and a level 50 macro. Pick whichever one works for your gear that you have equipped. You can also test if a craft will be successful by using a trial synthesis option. This will essentially just do a dummy test or a dummy craft, and it will not use up any of the materials that you have. At this point, you will also now want to start using higher level crafting foods in order to hit the CP required. In my opinion, the best to use at this point would be the HQ blood. You can also use some command craftsman syrup for an extra CP buff if required. These can be purchased on the MB, and at this moment in time they should be fairly cheap. I would continue to use this method up to level 65. Note that if you are not gathering the materials yourself, this can start to become a little more expensive compared to obviously the level 20 recipe that we were making. In which case you may want to focus on completing leave quests to filler in between some levels. I would however advise against using too many leaves unless you are already at a 100 leave cap and have nothing else to use them on. In this case, you can then use maybe 6 to 10 per day since you gain 3 leaves every 12 hours. Just make sure that you are not capped at 100 consistently and wasting the extra leaves that you could be making use of to level. To touch more on leaves quickly, for crafters, these are short quests where you can hand in items for XP. Each completion will cost you 1 leave, and you have a maximum of 100 leave allowance as mentioned before. These can be picked up in the main cities based on your level, similar to how the gear vendors work. The reason I wouldn't use all leaves at this stage is because these become a lot more ideal to use when leveling from 80 to 90, so it's probably best to save as many as you can until then. Once you hit between 63 and 65, this is when I would stop crafting for a while and just focus on job quests. The main reason we want job quests up to level 65 is for the skill manipulation. This skill is essential and will be important to use in almost all endgame crafts. The best way to prepare for this, and this is also what I did, was I looked up a list of items that needed to be handed in all the way up to level 65 job quests, and then I just set some time aside to actually craft all of the items. You can either gather all the materials yourself or you can purchase these on the market board. They should be fairly cheap. Just a quick tip, if you are planning to craft all the items yourself, then it will be best to make 2 or 3 of them. That way you can use one for yourself and then sell 1 or 2 on the market boards. If you check the market board for prices, you will see that these will usually net you a nice profit. However, if you already have enough gil and you just want to power through this bit, you can just purchase all the handing items off the market board. Once you have completed all job quests up to 65, you should have also gained a few levels from the quest rewards, and you are now ready to make some more gear upgrades. I would highly suggest just crafting your own gear or purchasing vendor gear in Kagane. Make sure to check the MB prices, as sometimes you can actually find the vendor gear for cheaper at this level. Keep in mind that you should only be a few levels away from level 70 now, which is where we will then purchase white script gear. You may be thinking, why gear up now if again at 70? Well, you will need to have decent gear in the first place in order to successfully craft the handing items to even get the white scripts. From level 68, my suggestion would be to spam some collectible crafts. You can find collectible appraisers in any of the 3 main starting cities. These work similar to the Ishgard restoration method, but instead you will be rewarded white scripts. The recipes you need to craft for these collectible hand-ins all start with rarefied in the name. The mats for these are usually cheap to buy on a market board, or they can be gathered. I would suggest to do this up to level 70, and by that time you should have enough scripts to buy a full set of level 70 white script gear. So from level 70 to 80, I did a mixture of Ishgard restoration and collectibles. I gathered most of the mats for collectibles myself, and for the Ishgard recipes I purchased the approved grade 4 materials from the market board and also gathered the rest of the materials myself. If I couldn't find any cheap approved grade 4 materials on my server, then I would just world hop to another server and see if you can find some there. If you do decide to go with the Ishgard restoration method at this level, I would highly suggest making sure to have the level 70 white script gear and then focus on making the level 60 Ishgard recipe. You will now want to move on to the level 65 Ishgard macro, which I will include in the link in the description. This will now also include the manipulation skill. It will be a 2-step macro now, meaning you will have to use the first macro for step 1, and then when it's completed, you will need to use the second macro to finish off the craft. Just make sure that you're using crafting foods and syrup if needed at these levels. You can also upgrade to using chili crabs now if your pocket allows you to, since these got a lot cheaper after the release of Endwalker. However, I don't think that these should be necessary. You can technically still use the blood. Once you hit level 75, you can then move on to the level 70 Ishgard recipe, and then use the level 70 macro that I will be sharing. If the mats are too expensive, however, just stick with this level 60 craft all the way up to level 80. I will post the macros that I use for collectibles and also for Ishgard restorations for the level 70 to 80. So this is another method which I didn't use myself, since I found the other ways that I've mentioned already to be much more quick and efficient. You can unlock this just opposite the crystalline mean aetheryte. As far as I've been told, these are fairly easy to complete, and the quests you complete are grouped for crafters. For example, you complete one quest for both alchemy and culinarian, and pick the one that you want to receive the experience on. So now that you've hit level 80, we are now at the final sprint. Believe it or not, this part is actually super quick, as you will just be spamming your leaves and getting a ton of experience in return. Before we start, however, you will want to get a complete set of eye level 500 white script gear from the collectible vendor. So the best way to tackle this section would be to just look at the leave trading items and check the map prices on the market board. The prices have been fluctuating quite a lot recently, so some may be more expensive than the other at any given time. You will want to make sure you're trading in HQ recipes, and I will be providing a macro which you can use to ensure you have no issues in crafting them. To make it easier and a little cheaper, I would use the level 80 leaves up to level 83, and then move on to the 82 leaves up until 85, and so on until level 90. If you don't have any leaves to use, then the next method you will want to be using would be the collectibles. These are also fairly quick, and the map prices at this time are not as near expensive as they were on Endwalker release. Again, if you want to gather the materials yourself to save gil, then by all means go for it. Personally, what I did to level all my crafters from 80 to 90 was use the collectibles. I had actually prepared in advance and saved a lot of gil aside just to use to be able to buy all the materials needed. And I managed to get all my crafters from 80 to 90 on the second day of release. This is just to give you an insight on how quick it is to actually get from 80 to 90. So Studium deliveries are the level 80 to 90 version of Crystarium deliveries. They work in the same way, where you collect and complete quests for your class, and in return you get a bunch of XP and scripts. These are fairly simple to do and the recipes don't require a lot, so it will be good to make use of them to fill it between some levels if you want to save on some gil. You can unlock it by heading to Old Charleon and then heading over to the Studium and picking up the blue quest. So congratulations, you have now hit level 90. I hope the journey was fun and educational for you, and I hope that there were a lot of tips that I had mentioned throughout the guides which continue to help you in the future. Whether you spend a lot of gil or a little bit of gil to level up, trust me when I say that it was an investment. With crafters now at 90, I hope that you will find all the gil you seek. This was my first guide and I do plan to make more, so if you enjoyed it, please subscribe and like and stay tuned for more content. Peace.